Welcome into Emerald and Lilywhite milestone episode. This is episode 20. We appreciate everybody who's been rocking with us throughout our first season. Of course, everyone at Seattle Spurs. We are the official YouTube channel of Seattle Spurs. We appreciate everybody at the club, everybody at the OSC for giving us the opportunity to continue to build this Emerald and Lilywhite platform. In terms of building, excited to announce we have a new member of the show who's joining us for the first time today. You can, of course, find me at Scotchy Bird. I'm Scott hosting today, but I want to introduce, again, that said newest member, Robbie Bittinger. Robbie, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell the people where they can find you on social media, most importantly, and then we'd love to hear a little bit about what brought you to Spurs and more specifically Seattle Spurs.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be here. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Robbie_Light, Lite. On Twitter, I'm just Robbie Light because some guy who hasn't logged in 7 years has my username, and I've tried to contact him for years and get my username consistent. But yeah, no, I started watching Premier League soccer in like 2016, and it was actually a funny story. I was living in Chicago at the time. I had a roommate who would wake up at like 4 or 5 a.m. to watch Liverpool. And I was just kind of like, what are you doing? Like, what are you waking up to do? And I grew up playing soccer, but I never really watched professional soccer. And he like told me about it. And I was like, okay, well, I need to pick a team so I can trash talk with you. Like, I don't want to pick Liverpool. Ran through a whole list of reasons of like, it's got to be a major city team. Like, it's got to be either Manchester or London. Like, I don't think I could have the patience to pick a team from one of the smaller parts of England. So I was like, narrowed it down there. I'm also always been like an anti-sports fan where I don't love the popular choice. I don't love the teams that are just spending. Like in American baseball, I always use the Yankees analogy, which I think the Dodgers have sort of taken over that now. But so, yeah, I was like, I don't want to do Arsenal or Chelsea. So, and then I was a big Harry Kane fan from just what I'd seen in international soccer. So that's when I picked Tottenham. And I think the other piece of the story too was there was an article that came out saying, if you're a fan of Big Ten sports, I'm a Wisconsin Badger alumni. If you're a fan of this Big Ten team, you should root for this Premier League team. And they compared Tottenham to the Wisconsin Badgers because, like Wisconsin, they are pretty scrappy. They do a lot with a little. There's a lot of homegrown players in Wisconsin. It's big, giant offensive linemen that work on farms growing up, or same story in a lot of the Midwest. But Tottenham, a lot of homegrown players. But ultimately, when they get to the biggest, brightest stage, they choke horrendously and never win the big game. And as a Wisconsin Badger fan, I'm no stranger to that. They've never really won any championships or things, but they've gotten close. They've won maybe hockey and volleyball and things like that, but the big money sports like football, basketball have never really done it. So I love misery, I guess, in a way. So that's why I'm here.
Hey, there are very, very many Spurs fans who share a similar story. And I always love the comparisons of American sports or American-centric sports teams to Premier League teams. And Tottenham certainly fits in that category. I do think there's an element of us forgetting as Americans that there might not be equal parity in European soccer. So an underdog today in the U.S. sports scene certainly won't be an underdog forever, right? It feels like with Tottenham, it may be a more of a long-term thing, right? Especially after the match we're about to talk about. But yeah, super glad to have you. And then I know you said you moved to Seattle a couple of years ago, right? So obviously went to Wisconsin, which, by the way, I'm a big hockey player. Played club hockey at Iowa State. Have a ton of respect for the Wisconsin Badgers and everything they do on the ice. But yeah, talk about you being in Seattle too for a second, if you'd like to.
Yeah, no, I'm someone who's lived, I guess, a ton of lives. I work in corporate America. I work in advertising, but what I've really been doing outside of that for probably 10 years now is I'm a performing comedian. I'm also a voice actor. Since I've lived in Seattle, I've become a regular performer at Bandit Theater. It's an improv theater here in Seattle. So I have shows weekly, sometimes monthly, depending on what it is. I've been known to be at a stand-up open mic here and there. Haven't done a ton of stand-up since I moved to Seattle, but way more into the like improv type comedy scene. And then, yeah, like I mentioned, a budding up and coming voice actor. So if everything goes to plan, maybe you'll hear me on the radio soon, or, reading some side effects to some drugs on TV or something boring like that until I'm good enough to work on video games or cartoons or things like that. But yeah, just an overall creative person trying to find that outlet and, find some joy in life as we all are. So, but yeah, I lived here about 3 years. And I moved to Seattle because honestly, I'd always wanted to. That's always the common question, like, because I do work for one of the big tech companies, and it's like, did you move here because of that? And it's like, no, honestly, I moved here because I've just always wanted to live in Seattle. I think there's a lot of great things about Seattle. It's a big enough city with a lot of access to outdoors, to nature. Water is important to me, being near the water. So love it here. And weirdly enough, I actually did grow up in Wisconsin, but I grew up a Seattle Seahawks fan because of their colors. I absolutely despise the Green Bay Packers green and yellow colors. So as a 6-year-old, as a 6-year-old with parents who didn't care about sports, it was really hard to convince me to be a Packers fan. And so I just out of the blue was like, I like blue and green, and the Seahawks look cool. So there's nothing deeper to it than that. So yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, well, hey, we're glad to have you here. Not only Seattle Spurs, but Emerald and Lilywhite, and Robbie will be a regular contributing member of the show. For all those listening, make sure you follow Robbie again at Robbie_Light on both Instagram and TikTok, and at Robbie Light because of that criminal at Twitter who doesn't want to give his handle up.
Yeah. And my Twitter is pretty much all sports related. Like I only do my sports talk on Twitter. My TikTok and Instagram is the comedy stuff, the creative stuff I'm doing. So if you want to talk Spurs, Twitter's the place for me, or X, which I still will not call it that.
Always Twitter.
Nope.
Yeah, we've blamed Elon Musk for quite a few things on this show already, so feel free to join in. But yeah, honestly, folks, follow Robbie. Make sure you get a chance to get all his opinions, Spurs related, also non-Spurs related, on other platforms, and maybe even catch yourself at one of his improv shows. But glad to have you here, Robbie. Thanks for taking the time to introduce yourself. And then, of course, with us as always, is my co-host Max at Going Limbs. Max, what's up, man?
Not much, Yeah. Jets played at 6:30, lost, crushing loss. Parlayed that into Spurs at 8:30. We know how it went. So just coming off that, and I'm trying to bounce back.
Right on. Furious with Spurs myself. I'm wearing my Iowa State hat because Spurs don't deserve.
Also, hey, shout out the W, beat Michigan, got revenge for last year. So that was lit. Win. Yeah.
Big win. Yeah, college football is great. My Cyclones are ranked 11th in the nation. We're 5-0, and playoff destiny in our own hands. So Spurs can take a backseat. We could just talk college football if you guys want. But no, all jokes aside, let's jump into it. As you see down below on the banner, Spurs fall to Brighton 3-2, and we're saying in disastrous form today. I do believe it was an absolute disaster of a result, considering where we were at halftime, right? It's never easy. Lineup, we'll get into that quickly. Obviously, Vicario and net, Porro, Romero, Van de Ven, and Ndogi across the back line. Bentancur, Kulusevski, and Madison, which is now, I would say, firmly our Premier League starting midfield.
I don't know about that anymore.
I mean, there questions can be asked for sure, and we'll talk about that, right? But historically has been. And then up top, Werner, which is going to be the controversial talking point, we could say, gets a start. And Johnson on the right-hand side, those two flanking Solanke. I think the latter two there were pretty great. And again, we're going to get into that, but pretty standard Premier League lineup for Spurs. And they come out and lay it down in the first half and go in at halftime 2-0. Let's talk about the lineup, though. I'm going to come to you first, Max. Anything, and I probably know where you're going with this, I may maybe leading the witness here, but did anything stand out for you when you saw the lineup posted?
Just Timo Werner playing. Shouldn't be playing. He shouldn't be starting. This is the fourth straight game he's started. I don't know if he was qualified to start any of those games, especially with Mikey Moore on the bench. I understand that Moore played 97 minutes during the week. Werner's played far more than that this season and in the past couple weeks. Moore was one of our better players on Thursday, and I don't think Timo can say the same. He got the assists, but I don't know. I don't think that was a very impressive assist. He also should have got another assist in the first couple minutes. Maybe this game would have been 3-0 and it could have been a different story. not to blame the loss on him. Obviously, it wasn't his fault, but I just think like consistently having him out there, not subbing him off until minute 80 something is just, I just don't see it. I know we don't have depth, but it's just like we gotta like put Mikey out there. Like it's an international break. He'll have time to recover, whatever, be ready for West Ham. But you can't keep putting him out there. You just can't.
Like you said, depth factors into the fact that we're even having this conversation, right? Before I share my own opinion, Robbie, I'd love to get your take on the Werner / Mikey Moore of it all, and where you'd maybe go if you were picking a lineup.
Yeah, and again, I've mentioned to you guys off the air, like I wouldn't say tactics are my strong suit, but I do have an opinion. And again, I've only seen Mikey Moore playing for the Spurs, like first team. I have never seen him as a youth. I've never seen anything what he's capable of there. My only impressions of what I've seen of Mikey Moore, to me, at least, especially in the game this past week in the Europa League, it felt like he was more prone to dribble it inside or make that move inside, kind of like what Kulusevski does. And I don't think that's what Ange wants. And I think that's maybe why he's been going Werner, because every shot I've seen Mikey Moore take, he's been in the middle of the pitch. I think like I haven't seen him cross the ball, and I'm not in any way saying he can't. I'm just, from what I've seen so far, he feels like maybe he's not even a natural winger for Ange's system. And just because of what Ange just wants, blind crosses is what my impression is. Obviously, again, not as informed on the tactics, but I'm wondering if that's part of it. Is just like, is Mikey Moore a better like attacking midfielder in Ange's system because he likes to be in the middle? I don't know. Or is this just a symptom of where we're at with depth? I don't know. I understand the Werner decision. No one's thrilled with it. I don't think anybody's thrilled by it. But again, it's his perception is so terrible. Like, he's obviously can't finish. We know that. We've seen it. But I do think his crosses are good. Like, I think he makes some good crosses. But I think it's up to what Ange wants, and I can't speak to that because I'm not as versed in the tactics. But to me, it feels like he just wants blind crossers, and that's kind of what Werner can do. So maybe that was part of it.
Yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying. I still feel this way, as controversial as it is. But I said on Twitter the morning before the match, I said I think Werner's the right decision, and I think depth plays into, again, the conversation that we're even having to have. But I do think Werner stretches the defense and finds space in a way that Mikey Moore does not even remotely come close to doing. And that's no disrespect to Mikey Moore. He's just 17 years old and a different profile. So I do think Ange is opting for someone, again, who stretches the defense and is able to find space in behind the line. And Werner understands the off-ball element to our system more than Mikey Moore does. But Mikey Moore is also going to be able, I think, to make an impact more directly than Timo Werner has been able to. But I think that's situational. The situation needs to be more short-lived than it has been. Don't get me wrong. You can't give someone a free pass forever and just say it's situational, right? But I understand Ange's decision, we could say, to start Timo Werner. But I do firmly believe, and not to just sit on the fence on a podcast, right? Nobody needs that. But I think at this point, whether it's Mikey Moore or Timo Werner, we just need Son and Odegaard back as quickly as that can happen, right? And again, not to take anything away from Mikey Moore, who I think will be, mark my words, a world-class top 5 winger in the world if he continues the trajectory that he's on. But still a few years off for me. So we'll do well for Son and Odegaard to get back. It sounds like Sonny much more quicker than the latter, but yeah, like I said, I can see whomever feels either way when it comes to Mikey Moore or Timo Werner.
Yeah, I just think it's like you said, it's like, how many times are we going to do this? Like, I understand, like, Ange wanted him. It's obvious we renewed his loan. He's an Ange type player. You're right. He gets good crosses into the box. How many assists does he have? 1, and it wasn't even a cross. He bottles every single 1v1 I've seen from him. It's just like game in, game out. He's just doing nothing. He's just doing nothing for me. And it's like, if Mikey's going to be a part of this team, then this is the perfect opportunity, because once Son and Odegaard do come back, he's likely not going to play that much, start that much. And I feel like in this type of game, at the very least, if he's not starting, we got to bring him on before the 83rd minute. And that's something that Ange has kind of dismissed, which I kind of have a problem with. But, I'm definitely one of the bigger Mikey Moore fans in the Tottenham fan podcast community. So I'm a bit biased here, but that's just what I think at this point in time. It's just like we keep trying the same thing over and over again. It's not working.
Yeah, well, I think that's a fair point. I'll just say this quickly. I think it's a fair point that you said, like, now that Son and Odegaard are out, like, this is the time to get a minute. So I have something I hadn't considered, and I think that's a fair point.
Yeah, great point. I hadn't thought about it as directly either. So, and I think there's two talking points around Ange's press conferences, and we're going to get to this, so we're not going to talk about it now, right? But it's substitutes and it's set piece defending that have been fairly dismissive when it comes to Ange's responses, right? So again, we're going to talk about that as we get to big picture. But let's talk about the subs briefly. Sarr, Basuma, and more come on. We talked about it off the air, and I'll get both of your opinions on this. But Max, I'm going to come to you because you had expressed your discontentment, right? But Sarr, Basuma, and more come on late. I definitely don't understand the decision to bring on two more defensive, or at least at best box to box, and a defensive midfielder when we were chasing the game. It feels very, dare I say, anti-Ange Postecoglou and the bravery that he instills in his teams, right? And then your boy Mikey Moore comes on, Max, which was a great decision. A little too late, like you said, but what do you make of the substitutes? And again, we're going to talk about the press conference, but you personally, what do you make of the substitutes?
I mean, it's just shambolic subs from Ange. We go down in the 66th. At this point, we've blown a 2-goal lead. We're losing 3-2, right? He waits 13 minutes until the 80th minute to sub on two defensive midfielders. He leaves Lucas Bergvall on the bench, who's a spark at the very least. He leaves Jed Spence on the bench, who's also an attacking spark. Udogie's had the worst game I've ever seen from him. He leaves Will Lancashire on the bench. I don't know if you're ever going to put him in, but at least that's like something attacking rather than like a 6 and a more defensive-minded 8. And then obviously he eventually brings Mikey Moore. How Mikey Moore is not the first sub is baffling, and how Lucas Bergvall doesn't come into the game is also baffling. Those are the two biggest misses for me. Lancashire, whatever, Spence could go either way. They could have made an impact, could have not. But the fact that Lucas Bergvall didn't appear and that Mikey Moore, it took 85 minutes to get him on is just, it's just mismanagement.
Yeah, Robbie, what do you make of two specific things he mentioned? And these are maybe what I'm curious about more than anything, right? But what are your perceptions on Bergvall and the impact that he maybe has or hasn't made yet? And then Jed Spence coming on for Udogie, because I think Jed Spence not coming on for Udogie was maybe the biggest miss, in my opinion, from Ange in this match. I look back to not only Coventry, but Man United when he came on when he came on in the second half. He was fantastic, and most importantly, fantastic getting forward and making things happen on the attack. So, again, very long question for me, but what are your takes on the lack of Bergvall and the lack of Jed Spence in this match?
Yeah, well, I should admit my bias first. My family is Swedish in descent, and my family immigrated to Minnesota, and I was born there and moved to Wisconsin. So I am some of the biggest Kulusevski and Bergvall fans you're going to find. Those are my Swedish brethren.
Yep.
You can't tell them from me sitting down. I'm 6'6". I got Viking blood. I'm a giant dude. So I love my Swedes. I think, yeah, to your point, I have, since maybe the first or second game, been watching James Maddison, like, holding my breath, because it seemed really early on that around like minute 60, he would just fall off a cliff. Yeah. And so I think he started to stretch out further and further and further each game. But the first couple games, I was like, we need to sub off James Maddison. I'm getting nervous that he's hit his limit here. And I love James Maddison, for the record. So that's always in my mind now of like, is he tiring out? He's still getting back into form. Like, where is he? But yeah, love Bergvall. I do think if there's any like devil's advocate here, and this is, again, I'm not saying this is correct, but from what I've surmised from Ange's comments historically is he's telling everyone, I'm not here to win this week. I'm here to win for the next 5 years. And someone like Mikey Moore, someone like Bergvall, who are teenagers still, who both played very long minutes 4 days before this game or 3 days, whatever it was. Maybe that's part of his thought process of like, is Bergvall ready to play back-to-back lots of minutes? I don't know. Again, I'm not saying that's right or wrong that he thinks that. But that's something I was thinking on. And then, back to Udogie and Spence. I agree. I love Udogie, but it was one of the worst games I've seen from him. And it was long coming, right? He never gets a break. He's playing every minute unless we put Ben Davis out there for these Europa games, whatever. We just don't have depth at that position. So he's fatigued. I guarantee you he's tired. He's making small mental errors. I don't know if this is exactly accurate. I was saying in our text during the game that 2 of those goals were just like weird bounces off his foot or like something he did that like really wasn't even the worst thing, but it just happened to lead to a goal. And that's just super unfortunate. I saw some Twitter threads today basically saying that it happened. The real errors happened in the like build up earlier. It just, that was the final thing where he was trying to clear it with his foot and it just dribbled off to the Brighton player or, just things like that. And it was long coming because he's probably just tired. And he's been playing his butt off for us, so can't really fault him there. But I haven't seen a ton of Spence at left back. I know he's played a ton at left back, but a lot of those Europa games I'm working during the day or I'm just like popping in and out of the game. So I've really yet to break him down from the left side, knowing that he's more of a right side guy, but he scored at least once, maybe twice from the left side. Right. So certainly a benefit there, but I just, unfortunately, I think it was coming for Udogie. Once it happened, there wasn't really like bringing on Spence wasn't going to erase the goals that happened. But I guess I don't have much to add on Spence's offensive ability, but I just think it was long overdue from someone playing too many minutes.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest point of all of this is fatigue, because and Max, you know this better than anybody. You're still actively playing, highly competitive soccer. When you're tired, your off-ball game suffers dramatically. It's not on ball, right? And I think to the average fan, and I don't say that as anything more than what it is, like to the average soccer fan, we tend to gravitate towards what's happening on the ball and are they scoring and are they assisting and blah, blah, blah. But it's all off-ball stuff that happens when you're fatigued. And I think we're seeing that with Udogie. The third goal that they scored,
Romero.
Dude, Romero just absolutely switches off.
That's the worst piece of defending I've seen in a long time. Like,
it was awful.
Say what you want about Udogie, that play from Romero is there's just nothing. I'm at a loss for words. It's one of the worst things I've seen a Spurs defender do. It's like just blatant, like not caring. Like I don't even know what happened. Like,
yep. Well, and I'm very hesitant to pick on our World Cup holding, vice captain, who frankly is always in the conversation for, could say, top 5 center backs in the world potentially, right? But top 5 center back in the world doesn't make that mistake.
Never.
I'm just going to come out and say that, right? It doesn't happen.
If you look at Virgil van Dijk, that's never happened in his whole career. I can guarantee you of that. And it's just like stuff like this. It's like, why is our it's always focus related, whether it's Basuma, whether it's the defending today, Udogie, Porro, even at times, our attackers. It's like we just check out. I don't know if it's the players' mentality, what they're hearing in the dressing room, what it is, but it's just so tiring. It's tiring because all the games that we throw away, it's like we should have won that game. Like we're the better team, and then it's just lapse in focus, and boom, we're down 3-2.
Yeah, it was not good. We saw the frustration on Ainge's face at full time as Brighton fans were going nuts, and he was just kind of taking it all in and reflecting. He did not look like a happy person. Just frustrated, of course, as any manager would have been, because, and again, we're getting into big picture stuff here. We're not quite there, but managers are only capable of doing so much, right? At some point, it's always on the players, and it's got to be frustrating for him to see just small mental errors lead to us pissing away a real firm 2-0 lead at halftime. Yeah. Anyways, the best thing I can say is at halftime, if you threw a little cheeky bet on Brighton coming back and winning, you would have done really well. And I saw that, and I said, no fucking way I would ever put money on Brighton coming back. Spurs have this. We're going to be. I was talking 6-6, 6 wins on the bounce, and
6-6 for Brennan though.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that right now. But yeah, I was thinking it was 6 wins in a row, and here we are. I think the most frustrating thing for me is we had so much momentum going into this match in all competitions. And when we really needed that momentum to carry into the City match in the League Cup, I really think we needed it to, and it's not going to now. And again, not that we can't win that match because we lost to Brighton. That's not my point, but it would have been really nice to just continue building on the momentum we had again in the five wins in a row. And but it is what it is. We move forward. Let's talk about Brennan Johnson briefly. 6-6. He is now the joint highest scoring winger in Europe right now, all leagues. Pretty fantastic. I'm not sure who he shares that honor with, if I'm completely honest, but I do know he's joint leading
Madueke.
Potentially. But Brennan Johnson's a man on fire. He's looking like he's worthy of every penny we spent on him. And again, form comes and goes, and there will be a time where Brennan Johnson hasn't scored in 6 straight matches, but he looks fantastic. Robbie, you want to talk about Brennan for a moment?
Yeah, no, I think one of the funniest things for me is like I just turned 35 a few weeks ago. I think the older I'm getting, the more I'm just having these moments where it's like I don't know how old Brennan is. What is he, like 23, 24, something like that?
Yeah, 23.
Like he is so young. He is like, there are a lot of Spurs fans on Twitter saying he was a bust. He wasn't worth the money. All the bullying that led him to deactivating his Instagram account and all that stuff. And it's like he's like still 3 to 4 years away from even being in what they consider his prime. Like he's still not even there yet. There's still so much time to improve. And you could say that about a lot of Tottenham squad at this point because we have so many young players. There's still a lot of time to figure that out. But yeah, I have very much enjoyed it. I have never once called for his head or said anything about him. I think, him and Timo Werner, I'm not putting them in the same conversation, but they maybe had that mental piece for a same timeline where Brennan was just frustrated or couldn't figure it out. And he had that breakthrough. And maybe that's what's empowered Ange so much to be like, I have to stick with Timo because it's going to work. It's going to work. But those demons might be a lot larger for him than they are for Brennan. But no, I love what he's doing. I'm honestly shocked that he's scoring these goals from these angles. Again, I was never a high level soccer player. I played until I was going into high school, but like a lot of his goals are really sharp angles, like the goalie's got the near post pretty much covered and it just still gets by him. And yeah, he's had a few like breakaways or tap ins and things like that are always awesome to see, but yeah, I'm just impressed with him and I don't really have much to say other than that.
Love it. Yeah, and Max, I think it's worth talking about those angles a little bit more. His finishing is clean, and I believe 2 of his 6 goals in this run of 6 are with his left foot, if not a third. I know for sure 2 are. So he's finishing with both feet, putting himself in really good situations. We've talked about it a lot over the past couple of weeks, but Ange has done a good job of finding a way to get those wingers to make that run into the inside channel. Again, I'm not going to say they're inverting, they're not, right? But they are finding that run into the inside channel. Brennan Johnson much more so than Timo, and that's probably by design, right? But Brennan is finding that space. But yeah, talk about those finishes for a second, Max.
Yeah, beautiful finish with the left against Brighton. Just love it on his right. It seems like he's really mastered that like touch, and then like in between the 6-yard box and the 18, which is a really tough area to score from and a really tough area to defend as well. So if you can get that bigger touch into that space and then just snap it off, it's so hard to defend. This is how a lot of wingers have like made their bread. It's either that or the cut in, and obviously Brennan's not the cut in type, so he's kind of figured out his niche there. And I just want to say, like, Brennan Johnson stepping up in this way when we have our two of the wingers that were starting over him before this run of form both get injured, and for him to do this when they're out, it's just, you can't say enough good things about him. Like, he stepped up huge in this run of games and like potentially like saved the season in some sense. I mean, I don't think the Prem's going as we planned already, but what he's done, we had won every game he scored in up until yesterday. Maybe saved Ange's job in the Coventry game. Like, he's done wonders for the club this year. So you can't give him enough praise for how good he's been, especially after the abuse that he was handed earlier in the year.
Yep. No, I completely agree. He was man of the match. According to SofaScore, they gave him a 7.8, highest Spurs rating. Probably pretty obvious, right, based on the way the things panned out. But really happy for Brennan. And as much as I love Wilson Odobert and have very high hopes for him, he's walking back to some stiff competition when he returns from injury. And Brennan's got that right wing position absolutely locked down, as tight as can be. Darrell Revis lockdown, we could say, Max. He's got that spot on lock. So, there you go. God, I love some Darrell Revis. But yeah, anyways, super happy for Brennan. Long may his form continue. Again, I keep saying I want him to break 10 straight matches with a goal. I think he can do it.
11, break Vardy's record. Come on.
Let's go. Come on, Brennan. And we do know wholeheartedly that Spurs listen to this show. So, Brennan, we beg you.
Feed Brennan.
Yeah, we need 12. Up to Brennan Johnson. All right, let's talk ratings. Not going to be as pleasant of a conversation as we've had in recent times. Max, you're gonna carry the load here. You're the ratings guy here at Emerald and Lilywhite. Robbie and I are here to provide color commentary. But start wherever you want and go through your player ratings for yesterday.
Yeah, I'll just start at the back. Vicario 6. I don't know. Not his fault. The shots weren't really savable. Kind of just defensive mishaps there. So can't blame him. Didn't really make any good saves either. So 6 for him. Van de Ven 5. Probably one of his worst games I've seen him play for Tottenham. He was getting skinned left and right. Like, his on-ball defending, I don't know if it's fatigue. I don't know what it is. It was terrible. He was diving into tackles. Obviously, the first goal that we conceded, he got skinned bad, both him and Udogie. So 5 for him. 5 for Romero. I thought Romero played really well in the first half, especially playmaking. I thought he was great on the ball. But that third goal, like I said before, just horrendous defending. It's just inexcusable. There's no way a professional footballer should ever be that switched off. Udogie 4, we've talked about him, just bad game. I don't even think, like Robbie said, I don't even think it was like necessarily like that bad of defending from him. It was just kind of unlucky, but he just has to be better. So 4 for him. And then I got Porro at a 6. I thought he was the best of our back line, Pedro Porro. I gave him a big shout out, a big praise during our pod on Thursday. So, just love the guy. He's super consistent. Give him a 6. He kind of maybe could have done a little bit better on the third goal, but obviously Romero's guy. So that's the back line. So I'll throw it to you guys. Anything to add for the back line?
Yeah, I'll just say, like, Vicario, I think he's a very, very solid goaltender. I have been a little worried on certain decisions he makes or things lately. None of it's permanent, certainly fixable. Like, I'm also a really big hockey fan and watch a ton of hockey, big Seattle Kraken fan.
Kraken.
Whenever a hockey goalie tries to like play the puck out the back, you're like, what are you doing? Get back in goal? Stop doing that. Or when they give up rebounds. And I think that's one thing for me. And I'm not the first person to say this, but Vicario giving up rebounds and not like snuffing the ball out a lot of the times. And I think what people have been really vocal about lately is him not going up to get the ball in the air, right, or he'll punch it instead of grabbing it. I think sometimes that causes some breakouts or some quick recoveries of the ball. And it's just like, I don't know what to say about it or how to coach it or, what any advice I would give, but some of that stuff makes me more anxious than I want it to. So he's starting to get me a little nervous. But
yeah, honestly, I don't have much to add. I think the biggest piece that I'll focus on is that I agree with you wholeheartedly on Van de Ven, and that's a tough thing to say. I don't expect a solid 5 from Mickey Van de Ven, but have to agree that it was a poor one from him. Move up to the midfield. What do you got?
Rodrigo Bentancur, I have at a 4. I thought in possession he was bad in the first half even. I was like not impressed with his performance. Defensively, shocking. Fully switched off. I don't know. It seemed like he didn't contribute defensively at all throughout the entire game. Didn't seem like he wanted to go into tackles. It was just bad, all around bad from Bentancur. I would venture to say that he was our worst player. Like, I know people want to pile on Udogie. I think just because he wasn't in the defense, he kind of got a bit of a pass, but he was really, really poor. And we talk about him versus Basuma every single podcast. And I think I've kind of been the Basuma guy. Yeah, I still think Basuma is the one you want in there. And I think he should start coming out of the international break. As for our 2 dual 8s, let's call him Madison got the goal. I'll give him a 7. I thought he was good. Good build up for both goals from Madison. 7 for him. Probably could have been higher if we hung on to the win. And then Kulusevski, kind of a mid game from him. Taking off Madison instead of him, I don't know about it, but with how many chances that he's been creating recently, can't really argue too much there from Ange's side of things. So I just give him a 6. Fine game, both of them. I thought Madison was good for the majority.
Yeah. Robbie, anything to add?
yeah, I think I'll just quickly say, like, the fact that I almost never even noticed that Bentancur was on the pitch this game, I think speaks to that. Like, I don't remember him making an impact at all in any way.
Yeah. Scott, any takes on that? I was like so unimpressed with Rodrigo.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think we've had a lot of conversations around the two different 6s that we have and what they can both provide. Thought Bentancur had been really good as of late, was not good yesterday. But no one was good yesterday. And I think some maybe what I'm saying again, and I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but I think a lot of these ratings are more indicative of maybe a bigger problem than individual performances yesterday. But yeah,
I
completely agree.
I just think, like, for the 6, right? Like, I think the main takeaway from the 6 in the defense is that we are absolutely incapable of like weathering any storm of attacks. Like, we fold like a wet napkin every time we get pressed, and then it seems like we concede one, we concede another. Our mentality is just gone. Like, you see it in the Romero piece. Like, we've conceded 2 goals and you're still that switched off. It's like, come on, man. Like, so it's just frustrating. It seems like our mentality isn't where we want it. And I feel like a 6 being like the linchpin of the team and like the guy that pulls the strings, but also is helping in the defense. It feels like we kind of don't have that. And I feel like Chang made a good point the other pod where he was like, I feel like both our 6s, like, they're not really the 6 that would hold down a game for us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of starting to agree. I didn't agree with him then because I personally thought that both our 6s were doing really well at the time. But I see where he's coming from, where we need a guy that's going to calm it down. Like, we have no one who's calming our players down, settling in, helping us get out of when we're getting attacked a lot. And I feel like that's like kind of a 6 role. And he just didn't provide that. And I don't think Basuma provides any sort of calmness either when he's in there. So it's an interesting dilemma.
Yeah, I mean, I frankly don't think Basuma has been good enough at any point in time, and I think Bentancur has been inconsistent at best. I think he's provided what we needed at times. Again, not consistently. kind of all goes back to his injury last season, right? But ultimately, I think Rodrigo Bentancur, while he can play a 6 very well, is not a true 6. I believe he can play an 8. I believe he can play as a 10. He does it for Uruguay.
I think neither of them are honestly true 6s.
I agree. So I think the biggest reason why I'm okay with those two competing for the 6 is because I just don't know realistically who we could go out and get that improves us in the 6 position. I think there are players. I think we potentially missed out on Amadou Onana from Everton. Now I can't even think of where he is now.
He's at Villa.
Aston Villa, thank you. But I'm just not sure I'm able to go directly to a 6 who I would ask Spurs to go and sign anyways. I think it's a tricky position right now in world football. Maybe we go get Casemiro, right? He's been fantastic up north, but please make
Ericsson.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yes. Please listen or understand that was sarcastic. If it didn't come through, please do not sign Casemiro. But anyways. I think there's a conversation to be had about the 6s that could turn into a longer pod than we need this one to be. Let's move up top. You want to start with Timo and get that out of the way?
Honestly, yeah, 6 for Timo. Good, pretty good. That one mishap for the Johnson goal, or the Johnson non-goal, I should say, should have been a Johnson goal right at the start. But yeah, just left him on a bit too long. Like, he was pretty effective in the first half, second half, offered us absolutely nothing. And the assist wasn't like anything special either. So I'll give him a 6. He wasn't bad. He wasn't good. Solanke, my man, 8. Created both goals. That pass to Brennan. Oh, that's mint. And then created the second goal as well on the break, holding it up well. So, I mean, I can't say enough good things about Dom Solanke. I think he's honestly our best player. And I feel pretty comfortable saying that at least for this game and for the last, I don't know, 5 games. So 8 for him. And then, I mean, alongside him, just as good, Brennan Johnson, I'll give an 8 as well. Really lively, just full of confidence right now. We talked about him. 8 for Bren.
Love it. Robbie, I want to double click on Solanke for a second. He's been fantastic. What do you got to say about Big Dom?
Yeah, no, I think I was very worried the first 3 or 4 games, not about Dom, but about a trend that continued from last year where our attackers were all just like passing to each other. It was like no one wanted it. No one wanted to shoot. No one wanted to score. No, you have it. No, you have it. Someone gets dispossessed in the box. Like, it was happening all last year. Yeah. Obviously, we didn't have a true striker. You know, Son can do it if he needs to, but he's still not a true striker. Richie, who knows what he is at this point.
Injury prone.
Yeah. And it was the first couple games. Obviously, we didn't have Dom in the second and third games. In the first game, he was just figuring it out. Like, I didn't take too much stock after game 1 of like, oh, he seemed a little off. It was like, well, it's his first game. I get it. But then he got hurt and we were back there again. And it was like, oh my gosh, somebody shoot the ball, please. Like, somebody just shoot it. So even though all the things that happened in the game yesterday, I don't think we're there anymore. I think we're shooting it. We're taking our chances. Yeah. Even if, James Madison or, somebody's ripping it from outside the box and it goes 100 yards over the crossbar, I'm like, that was a good shot. Like, I like that he shot it there. There's still situations like that. So I think we're in a much better spot from that standpoint.
Yeah, that's how he scored the second goal. Madison's shot definitely should have been saved, but it went in. So just put shots on target. Good things will happen.
Shoot the ball, man. Yeah, I completely agree with everything that you're saying. I'm really, really happy for Solanke. I agree that we did not lose yesterday because of our lack of finishing. We lost yesterday because of an absolute mental collapse, right? But we're putting the ball in the back of the net, and Dom Solanke is a huge piece of that. And we've talked about it already a lot on the show, but the manner in which we're scoring is all transition-based, and that's all Solanke and the press that he leads, right? So he's been an absolute revelation for Spurs, and I couldn't be happier for a guy that, has been fighting for his chance to get back to the top after stints at Chelsea, after stints at Liverpool. Had to settle at Bournemouth and earned his flowers, and now he's back competing, close to the top of Europe's game. So I'm really happy for him. Let's talk about that collapse. That's the big thing that we want to discuss here. Ange Postecoglou comes out and says it's as bad as it gets. He says it's its worst defeat ever at the club. Says Spurs didn't do the basics correctly. Ange had a lot to say, right? And again, we're gonna get to those two specific media points here in the bigger picture conversation. But I look at this collapse, and I think there's some weird correlation between Spurs losing and international break. We have a history of losing the match prior to international breaks. We did it numerous times last season. We lost to Newcastle this season before the first international break. We collapsed to Brighton before this international break. I think of mentality, and I think of guys who aren't able to just buckle down and stay in the present and get the job done before time off, right? I'll tell you what, if I have a week off, I don't do shit on a Friday. Well, maybe I do actually, right? Because I need to make sure that I'm not working at all while I'm off. But I'm sure the listener understands the point, right? But either way, my point is there's some sort of mentality bug at Spurs, and I think it's maybe been there for a long time. We talked about this a little bit off of the air. And Robbie, I'll come to you because you maybe brought it up or at least alluded to it off the air. But do you think there's anything to this idea that Spurs need to tighten up their mentality, maybe across all fronts?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think I'm an avid consumer of the Golden Guest Talk Tottenham podcast. Alistair Gold and Rob Guest from football.london, they talk extensively about the international break thing. Like I've got it ingrained in my mind too. And it's not even just that Tottenham loses. They lose in like glorious, horrifically confounding ways before an international break. It's not a hard fought 2-1. It's 6-0 to Newcastle, or, it's like this game winning 2-0. It's always something like that. And then you have to just stew on it. You just have to stew for 2 weeks of like, when can I see them play again? So I don't have to think this way anymore. I don't know what the answer is there. I do think we're in the middle of this, project rebuild, whatever you want to call it. We shuttled out a lot of players this year, still work to be done in that front, and obviously still need a lot more bodies in. So I think, we said this off air too, but like, I hate the word Spursy. I hate when people use the word Spursy. It drives me nuts because stuff like this happens to every club at some point. Someone's going through it. I have a coworker chat at my job with an Arsenal fan, a Man United fan. And it's like, hey, that none of us in this chat have won anything in 13 plus years, right? Like you guys can come here and make fun of me and say Spursy, ha ha ha. And it's like, everyone has done the same thing. The word is bottler for Arsenal. I don't know what you say for United. It's been so long for them that they've been building for 13 years. That's what I told my coworker. You've been building for the last 13 years. So yeah, every team goes through something like this. It is absolutely frustrating. No one likes it. I'm maybe one of the members of the minority, and especially in Tottenham Spurs Twitter realm, of like just trying to stay calm with the longer term here. This isn't something you solve overnight. Yeah, maybe there is a stink on this club that needs to be scrubbed out a little bit, of just this mentality or this thought that we're going to blow it, we're going to lose, just things like that. And yeah, the one thought I had to myself, which I thought was just ridiculous, I was just like, just once I wanted to feel confident turning off the match at halftime and being like, I have things to do today. We're up 2-0. I can go on with my day. And I have never had that feeling with Tottenham, because something always can happen and usually does. So that's, if there's anything I want to see from the Ange's project, honestly, is like, hey, can we win a game and it just be done? Like, can we not concede in the added time at the end, even though it doesn't matter, we still win. Let's still not give up a goal in the 98th minute to make it 2-1 instead of 2-0. Like, can we just close it out?
Yes.
So I don't have any answers for all of that, but yeah, I feel the pain of a lot of Tottenham fans, but I do, think we're in the middle of a very long, arduous process that some other clubs have gone through recently to just really tear things down and build back up.
Yeah, and that totally reminds me of something my good friend Daniel, who's a huge Liverpool fan, always says. he's like, good teams win 2-0. I love winning 2-0. We're never winning 2-0. We can't win 2-0. If it's 2-0, like you said, they're going to score one like on Thursday. It's like it's just the lack of focus. Like we can't see it through a 90, and it's really frustrating. And I've been, I think, largely critical of Ange this season. I think more so than Scott. I think more so than Chang, with his in-game management, and I think that was still true yesterday. But this is not a game where I'm looking at Ange at all. This is all on the players. Ange is right in the press conference. It is the players. They have to lock in and get these 3 points across the board. But what I do want to see from Ange is more accountability for himself, because I think where the disconnect between the fan base and Ange, like Robbie has said before, I don't know if it was off air, he said that Ange versus the fans is like a real thing. I think it's because of the lack of accountability that Ange puts on himself after a lot of tough losses, and he kind of brushes aside valid concerns such as the substitutes. And he kind of, it's just the demeanor in which he answers questions like, oh, I don't care about the substitutes. We would have lost anyway. I'm paraphrasing, but that's pretty much what he said. And it's just like, that rubs me the wrong way. But the loss yesterday is solely on the players and the lapse in focus that we saw.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say quick so you don't get the angry mob of Spurs Twitter at your throat, right? That Ange has come out and said it's on me to fix this. So like he's taking the onus, right? But I agree with everything you're saying. He's brushing off things that he could have done better to add to contribute towards a more positive result. We could say,
it's like, right? The way he answers it, it's like someone's asking a valid question, like, oh, like, why isn't Lucas Bergvall coming on? Why didn't we see subs earlier? And he's like, it doesn't matter because we played so bad. That's not what we're looking for in the answer.
Yeah. Well, and I think I do understand from his perspective, like the last thing you want to do is ostracize anyone on your team and say, yeah, he should have played instead of this person, blah, blah, blah. I think Ange has to come out and find a way to diplomatically put it on the players. And I also think he wants to, in a sense, put it back on the team in the press conference and say they were just shit. Like, it doesn't matter if we did this or this or this, because again, I think it's painfully obvious to me what happens here. You're up 2-0. You've won 5 matches in a row. You absolutely beat the shit out of Brighton in the first half. You go into the locker room 2-0, and you know that 45 minutes later, you're off for 10 days. You're flying to Spain. You're flying to Dubai. You're maybe going home, right? But you're not going to go to work for a little bit, and you're going to go enjoy yourself. You're probably a millionaire, and you got 10 days off, right? And you're up 2-0 at halftime.
You're a millionaire except Alfie Whiteman.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So yeah, millionaires like Alfie. Yeah. No, but so I do think that's exactly what happened. I think the players got complacent, switched off, and Ainge is fucking pissed. You cannot get yourself 90% of the way there and switch off. And that goes back to some of the mentality stuff. I think, Robbie, you said it astutely off the air. Mourinho came in and he questioned the players' mentality. Conte comes in and he questions the board, or more specifically the club. I don't want to say the chairman, right? But maybe the chairman with the mentality, right? Yeah, thank you, Daniel Levy. And then Ange comes and he questions the mentality of the fans, which I think rightfully so in some sense. I was in the minority last year that said, absolutely, I don't give a fuck if Arsenal wins the league. You worry about yourself, you win matches, right? If you don't want Arsenal to win the league, then be better. Don't throw a match against Manchester City so your rivals don't win the league. Just get better at soccer, and you can solve that problem, your own on your own with your own hands, right? So I agree with Ange. I know a lot of fans didn't, right? But I do
absolutely not. I don't agree with him there.
Yeah, I know, right? I know you were like, you now let Arsenal win the league, and
anything but that.
I get it, and I totally understand, and I respect that opinion. Like, I have no qualms with it, right? But I do understand if you're the manager of a club, and you've worked your ass off to get to Tottenham Hotspur, like you think that I'm going to go try to not win a game, you're out of your fucking mind. Like absolutely out of your mind. I'm here to win football matches.
Yeah. I think there's a little part of Ange, and I do enjoy this piece a little bit. There's a little bit of him that, like in America, we use the phrase like he's a football guy. Like I think there's some of that where the dismissals he does to these questions or like in the press conferences, he just kind of doesn't even think that way. Where he's just like, I wouldn't do that. So you don't get it. Like he's like, I don't want to compare him to like Bill Belichick or someone who like is always super awkward in press conferences, always just speaks straight to the point about what seems to be factual. Just maybe, and then someone will talk to Ange about it, and he'll go like, "Okay, like I didn't want it to like come across that way. I was obviously super pissed off. Like maybe he'll apologize, maybe he won't, or he'll make a joke about it. I don't know. I don't expect him to apologize. Honestly, I don't really need him to, but I think there is that part of him where he's like just this, again to use the term football guy. He's just like the players stunk. It's as simple as that. We don't need to go into tactics. We don't need to, we switched off. Whatever it is. Next question. Like I appreciate that sometimes. Like we don't need to have fluffy answers for everything, but yeah, it does definitely rub people the wrong way, and he does need to clarify at times. But
I agree with that, and I don't know when Belichick started handling the media in that way. I know my whole life, but also I was born at the start of the dynasty, so it's just like you can do that. I agree. I like it sometimes, but like you have to win something first. I don't know. In my book, like 6-time Super Bowl champ. Obviously, you're not drawing a direct comparison to him, but it helps when you've like really like won something and the fan base wholeheartedly trusts you. I trust him personally, but I think a lot of people don't right now, and it's just repeated tough losses like this make it harder for him to kind of duck these like tactical questions that are asked of him.
And I think for me, we can have this conversation for hours, I'm sure, but I'm someone who, again, is a very patient fan. And as I mentioned, like I was a believer of Mourinho. I was a believer in Conte. Even when they had their outbursts, when they said their things, it was like that needed to be said. It was correct. Like we have this mentality that needs to be questioned. We need to feel why we feel this way. There is no patience in the fan base for Tottenham Hotspur. There doesn't seem to be any patience. Like how can we fire a manager every 11 months and make any change? Like we have to, like Ange's number one thing has been rebuilding the academy. That takes years. That takes a long time. And those players that we're getting in there right now, other than Mikey Moore, aren't going to even be in the squad for 3-4 more years. We won't even know what this is going to be like. We saw what it was like when, Conte, when Mourinho would refuse to play anybody from the academy because they just weren't good. And that was honestly fair. Like I don't have a big issue with any of that. And our backups weren't good either. And like, Tottenham, we've never had roster depth before, and we just finally got some, and now we have all these injuries. But like another really big talking point this summer, especially after the Euros, was like, oh, Dragoshin is so good, we have to change to a back three.
Yeah,
and it was like, no, we don't.
No, we don't.
We need depth. We need any good club has 24 really good players. Like we don't need to get every player in the starting lineup all the time. And, Tottenham's biggest example was never having a backup for Harry Kane. That was just ridiculous. But like, we're finally at this point, and now we're getting injuries, which of course, but yeah, like, I don't know. I'm probably one of the more patient Tottenham fans. I think he still needs a long time to really lay some roads down. Obviously, the Pochettino era was the most successful era probably ever at Spurs, unless you want to count the 60s trophies or the 80s Euro. Those were certainly great times. But from like a, wow, this is so exciting, this is such an energetic time, the Pochettino era, I think, is one of the more revelational times of Tottenham Hotspur. And then obviously we had to pay for it because we didn't build anything underneath it. And now Ange is here saying, I'm going to build stuff underneath this so that when we're good, it goes on forever. Like that's the whole point of this. It's like, we don't want to be good for 2 years and then everyone's old and we didn't buy anybody. And we had what happened in 2019, 2020, etc. all over again. So, I'm patient. I don't think a lot of people are. If we fire Ange, it would be probably one of the most upsetting things that's happened during my time as a Spurs fan, unless it just really gets terrible. But I don't see that happening yet. And I don't even consider this to be that terrible. It's certainly upsetting, certainly made me, want to be really upset yesterday. And then my Seattle Seahawks also lost in an embarrassing fashion yesterday. So wasn't a great day. And yeah, Max, you and the Jets as well. So, yeah, it was a faith questioning day yesterday, just from a sports standpoint. But I don't have any concerns with Ange. I mean, there are some, but like I'm not here calling for anything other than like, let's figure this out more. Let's get more players in the transfer window in January. Maybe we get a 6 in January. I don't know. Maybe we get a left back in January, something like that. But I think there's still just so much going on here. And we played 7 Premier League games, I think. There's 31 games left. Like, that is so many games. That is an impossible amount of games left. So I'm not jumping to any conclusions yet.
Yeah, all really well said, and I'm glad you transitioned us to the Ange Postecoglou's job of it all. We're all sports fans here, American sports fans. I'll use a baseball metaphor. I look at the decision to not get the squad over the line under Pochettino as maybe a slight tear to the rotator cuff, right? Pretty impactful injury for a pitcher, we'll say, in baseball. I do believe Spurs were a little bit further ahead in the project than they anticipated at that time, right? I think Pochettino was brought in, and I'm going to go all the way back here. I think Pochettino was brought in to get us into the new stadium and say, we're not going to be able to spend money, but you're a guy who can get a lot more out of a squad than what it shows on paper. So come in and see if you can get more out of this squad that I can't invest much in until I get in a new stadium. Fast forward 2 years, we're competing for the Premier League. We're competing for the Champions League. And I think the club is like, well, shit, this is fantastic, but we're not prepared to compete at this level right now necessarily, right? So whatever the reasoning is, Pochettino isn't backed in a manner that gets him over the line. It all crumbles. We have egg on our face. Take a couple steps back. Daniel Levy says, all right, I've got a great cortisone injection in the form of Jose Mourinho. I'm giving you the shot in your shoulder, Spurs. Go see what you can do, right? We're almost there. Let's bring in Mourinho. Doesn't quite work. Same thing with Conte. One more Novocaine injection. And you finally get to the point where you're like, fuck, I'm just going to have to get the Tommy John surgery. And I guess that's elbow. So I could have done a little bit better with this metaphor, right? But I'm just going to have to get the Tommy John surgery, and I'm going to have to fight through the recovery period that's going to be nasty. And now we're in the midst of that Tommy John surgery. And I guess Spurs fans want to just take another Novocaine or a cortisone injection, right? When you're halfway through the process of recovering from Tommy John's, and it just sadly does not work that way. So we did what we had to do. We brought in a manager who is more than capable of getting us to where we want to be as an organization. I firmly believe that. I also think if you were to part ways, and I'm talking part ways because there is a group of Spurs fans out there that are calling for Postecoglou to be sacked after yesterday. If you do that, not only have you set yourselves back another couple of years, in my opinion, you've wasted a shit ton of money on players that were brought in specifically for Ange Postecoglou, right? So sacking Postecoglou would be just an absolute implosion, disaster, whatever euphemism we want to use here would be a very bad situation, right? So as you said, probably time to just sit tight, stay the course. It's one less than positive result, but I trust Ange to get it figured out.
Yeah, and I was thinking in my head, I was like, what does that make Nuno? Is Nuno like the starting pitcher wakes up the day he's starting and he sneezes too hard and he like pulls his back muscle? Like, is that what Nuno was, or what is it?
We don't acknowledge that time.
Poor Nuno.
That was the hardest summer of my life. Of like, why am I doing this? Like, we asked 6 other guys and they were like, no, I'm good. And it was
not interested, right? And to that point, though, say we sack Ange Postecoglou, that furthers anyone's absolute unwillingness to come to Spurs right now, right? Mm-hmm. Ange has been great, and anybody who sees what he's done in such a short amount of time and then to be sacked would just be horrible for the club from a PR perspective too. So anyways, absolutely.
We just need to chill. Like, it's Armageddon on Twitter every time we fucking lose. Liverpool lose at home. Nottingham Forest haven't lost since. They just took it on the chin. Let's move on. It's their only loss this entire season. Why can't we do the same?
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah, 31 more league matches as far as I'm aware. I think we played 7. Yep. I think we're 3-1-3. I think that's our current
500.
Yeah.
Just like the Red Sox, 81-81.
Well, hey, I'm glad we could get that big picture stuff out of the way. Before we wrap it up, Robbie, I want to come to you. I know you have a little Tottenham Hotspur Seattle Seahawks comparison, and because we are the official YouTube channel of Seattle Spurs, what better way than to talk Tottenham than a comparison to our own Seattle Seahawks here in the Emerald City.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, and, because I'm biased, I'm a fan of Tottenham Hotspur. I'm a fan of the Seattle Seahawks. I'm also a fan of some other sports teams that are kind of all in the same spot right now, which is so strange to notice. Like the Seattle Kraken are honestly kind of in the same spot. The Seattle Mariners are about to be in a similar spot. The Wisconsin Badgers are they're in year 2 of a new experiment college football wise. But yeah, I watched the Seattle Seahawks game yesterday. They have a brand new coach. They have the youngest head coach in American football. He's 37, 38 years old, Mike McDonald. Just to me, similar fan base reaction of just people really just overreacting. This is game 5 for the Seahawks. They're really changing their entire identity, much like Tottenham. The Seahawks were under Pete Carroll for, 14 years or so. And Mike McDonald, also a defensive-minded coach, but sees the game completely differently. Like, just couldn't be more different in a lot of ways. But yeah, it's such a weird experience to be going through this like identity crisis of, hey, we did things for so long one way. And I guess in Tottenham's case, they're going back to a way they used to, but I wouldn't compare Ange to Pochettino at all, but just that more exciting front foot type of game. But yeah, it's, things take time. This happens in every sport, in every league, to every club, to every team. There is just this tear down moment, this rebuild, this patience. I've heard a lot of podcasts obviously compare this to Arsenal. Like, you got to see how that was starting, how Arteta was just embarrassing himself for 2 years. Ange has arguably done a way better job off the front foot here. That Amazon Prime documentary with Arsenal, the locker room chats, that will never leave my mind. Arteta's motivational tactics.
On the screen.
But again, just like patience, and you have to design something, you have to build something. And I think, again, for someone like myself who has so little knowledge on the deeper intricacies of stuff, to understand that our academy was so bad for so long. Like we were riding on the coattails of, wow, we had Harry Kane. So clearly we're doing something right with our academy. And Mourinho and Conte both came in and they're like, what is happening here? Like, there was such a disconnect. The academy teams were playing a different style of offense or of play than our first team was. And that's a big reason why no one was ever breaking the starting lineup, because they didn't want to play counter Mourinho Conte ball, or they weren't used to it. So I'm patient. I've been a Tottenham fan for 8-9 years now. Tottenham as a club has existed for 140 something years now. This is such a small time in history that like it's worth seeing out, in my opinion. We signed Ange to a 5-year deal intentionally, right? Like we had Mourinho had the 1.5-year deal or not Mourinho, Conte had the 1.5-year deal or whatever it was. I don't remember how long Mourinho's was. His might have been 4 or 5 too, but that was kind of just the standard of how you hired a big name. But like I don't know. I don't see Daniel Levy giving up this early. I really hope he doesn't. I've been critical of Levy myself over the years, but once we hired Ange, I was like, all right, I'm excited about this. Like, my favorite sports teams do their best when no one's talking about them. Like, a lot of people wrote Ange off right away, and I was like, this is great. I like this. Like, I'm excited for this because this means people aren't paying attention. And yeah, maybe Tottenham needs the spotlight off them for a little bit. We don't need this pressure of look, they made the Champions League again in 4th place and they lost 1-0 in the knockout state. Like, maybe we don't need that right now. Maybe we need to just get the house in order. So yeah, I remain hopeful. I remain positive. But yeah, just a weird experience for me. A fan of multiple teams. The Seattle Kraken, same way. They've been a very defensive team, now transitioning to an offensive coach who did come from their ranks. So that's a little different. Like, he's been their minor league team coach for a few years and was a Stanley Cup winning coach for another team years ago.
A lot of years ago.
Yeah. But yeah, just a weird experience in my realm to just be following a lot of teams kind of going through an identity crisis. And, as a casual observer of all sports, it usually works out for people that stick to it. So, whether that success is 1, 2, 3 years, 10 years, who knows, but it'll eventually work out. So yeah, I'm staying positive.
Yeah. For the Hawks, I think like the thing about them is that I'm not a Hawks fan. I'm a Jets fan, but I think the thing with the fan base is I feel like there's still that people are impatient for like the full like rebuild. Like, Geno is still the quarterback. He's obviously not going to be the quarterback for like the McDonald era. So I think it's like, come on, let's get Geno out. Let's get a new quarterback. Lockett, you're a legend. We got to get JSN more touches. It's just like there's a few guys from the old guard that are still sticking around that I feel like people are a little impatient with for the Hawks. And then as for the Kraken, I don't know. We play the Blues tomorrow night, kickoff for the season. Scott and I have talked about this. I was a bit unsure about our free agency because I felt like we didn't sign any attackers or like forwards in hockey terms, and I felt like that was like our biggest weakness was scoring goals, but we kind of spent more money on the defense. Maybe that's because of Bylsma, is that how you pronounce it?
Mhm.
His philosophy is more attacking, but I don't know. I'm not super into. I'm
Yeah.
a casual Kraken fan. I watch the games, but I don't know
Yeah.
the ins and outs.
I think the Kraken are similar to Tottenham in that regard. Of there are a ton of young guys, and
Yeah.
I think the Kraken are at a juncture where it's like we don't want to bring in guys that are going to block those guys' paths.
Right.
We
Like
did
Shane
sign
Wright.
sign Chandler Stevenson, but very very questionable contract length and amount. But yeah, I'm a big fan of the Montour signing. I like that a lot.
Montour's good. Yeah. It's just more defense. And I felt like we still got Vince Dunn, who is like a really good defenseman. And I just felt like going forward, like we lost guys. Like obviously the playoff season was awesome. We lost Sprong and like Wenberg, and I felt like we never really replaced like that little production. And I guess that could be filled by like guys like Shane Wright, or if Cartier takes like a step forward this year. So
I think that was similar to the comment Scott you made earlier about like the Pochettino, like we were too good too quick. And I think that was kind of the Kraken second year, like to use soccer terms, like their expected goals were like so much low, like they were getting us so many lucky goals. I think the Kraken that year had like 6 or 7 guys that had 20 goals who had never had more than like 10 in their careers. Like there was just a lot of things going on there. And then there's a lot of dialogue online about how Seattle is still a place you kind of have to pay people to want to come. People aren't really sure about the NHL market. Like not Seattle. Seattle's sure about the NHL market, but other players that are from Toronto or grew up in Canada, they're like, what is Seattle? Do I want to live there? Do I want to play there? So there's a lot of that going on, but it'll probably be a middling average season for the Kraken this year, but as long as they score more goals, we're on the right track. And like I said, we have 8 to 10 guys in the pipeline that are like certified studs. And because of the way the NHL changed the entry draft rules or the expansion draft rules after Vegas had their run of the mill and took all these good players and made all these trades, Seattle really was screwed for their expansion draft, basically. So we're building through the draft, through these young guys. And much like soccer, European football, these guys are 16. We have to wait 6 years to see them get all the way up here. So a lot of excitement. I am 100% on the Shane Wright train. I couldn't be more excited for him. I got his jersey in the offseason. He's my pick for the year for the Kraken, to talk hockey for a second. But I think Shane's going to get 20 goals this year.
Awesome.
So I'm excited for him. And again, the team may be missing the playoffs or in the discussion, but I guarantee they're going to score a lot more than they scored last year. So that'll be exciting at least.
Yep. And looking for Beniers to take a step forward. Like we re-signed him. Luckily had like a down year for the contract, so I think we got him for way cheaper than he's going to be worth in a bit. So,
I was just gonna say, I think Maddie will have a lot to say with regards to how the season plays out offensively. I think sophomore slump again, we could say, right? We know that can be a real thing. And actually, it's hard to even say that, right? Because I think his freshman year was just a stint at the end of the season, right, when we made the playoffs. And I think he was a big reason why we had that run. So, anyways, it'll be – I don't want to put that much on Matty Beniers, but we'll need him to have a big season. And I really like Ty Cartier. I think it's probably because I was a third-line grinder. I played center. My role was to match up against the first line and beat him up, right? And I like Ty Cartier for some of that as well. So I'll be keeping an eye on him this season. We may have to just become a Seattle Kraken pod, and maybe we will.
You're gonna. I don't know if you caught any of the preseason stuff, but he's not going to be on the Kraken for years. But they drafted him this year. His name is Nathan Villeneuve, and he's someone who will punch you in the face. Like he literally did like a Gordie Howe hat trick. He punched someone in the face, scored a goal. Like he's one of those guys. And I love Brandon Tanev. I'm a big Turbo guy.
Yeah,
so. Unfortunately, Tanev is probably days are very numbered because of his contract. And there's a lot of younger guys that are doing that same type of thing, like Winterton and John Hayden, people that are going to throw some fists. Something we sorely miss on the Kraken is we need some more fist throwers. So I'm excited for that too. And my last hockey hot take I'll leave you guys with is every successful NHL team that has ever won something has a scary European guy with like a dark visor that just rips goals. Just a Russian guy that scores 30, 40 goals and has 2 assists. We need one of those guys. We have a few in the system. One of them's a guy named Yanni Neiman is how you pronounce it, or Newman, I think is how you pronounce it. Yanni Newman. He's like 6'5" center, just killer shot. He's going to be with the Firebirds this year, the minor league team, after coming over from Finland. So he's my best hope as of now, as a scary European guy. So hoping he'll make his way up soon.
I love it, man. Everybody needs their scary European player. I completely agree with you. Too bad we can't just stumble across like an Ovechkin or something like that, right? But,
yeah. Stumble across the top 10. Top 10 player all time. That would be awesome.
No, exciting times for the Kraken though. And obviously it's awesome to be a fan of a team that's, still building its identity and figuring out who it is. Not only the team itself, but the city as well from an NHL perspective. So yeah, really exciting times. I love the Seahawks comparison. I'm a Texans fan. I used to live in Houston, so I do root for the Hawks when they're not playing the Texans. Does that ever even happen? But yeah, big Texans fan, but I'm excited to watch the Seahawks too during this rebuild. And all you gotta go do is sign a CJ Stroud or draft a CJ Stroud, and I think the
pretty
Hawks
simple.
are ready to roll.
Lifelong, my all-time favorite athletes are the Manning family, and I'm hoping and wondering if the McDonald ebb and flow will line up to the point where we somehow get lottery picked the year of Arch Manning. That would be an all-timer for me. But yeah, maybe not. Maybe we'll be too good, I guess, which is a good thing. But
yeah, that reminds me that Ewers is coming up the pipeline soon too. So, good player. But yeah, anyways, I love it. Been a little bit of a longer show. Obviously, a lot to talk about and a new guest to introduce and all of that. So we're gonna get towards wrapping up here. But I want to finish with something positive because Spurs have been less than that as of the last few days. We want to talk about our top 5 players so far through the first, X amount of matches, and we'll say 7 Premier League and what is it? I think 10 total matches, all comps, right? So let's talk about the five standouts so far, and I think what we'll do here is let's just go one by one, and obviously I'll let you 2 pick 2 and myself 1, and let's draft the top 5, and then we can discuss, right, if that makes any sense. So Max, why don't you start and pick somebody who you think's in the top 5?
Yeah, so my number 1 pick is Dom Solanke. I think as of late, he's been our best player ever since he returned from injury. Absolutely magnificent. He's everything we needed. He makes the system click. He's so good pressing, hold up, playmaking, finishing, everything, whole package at striker. Dom Solanke. It's my boy.
Love it. Robbie, who do you got?
There's so many, and I feel terrible that I'm not about to say Brendan Johnson, but for me, the energy of Kulusevski has just been a refreshing experience of just like something in the middle is finally happening. And again, no shade to James Maddison. I love James Maddison, but he did suffer that pretty hard injury. He's kind of been finding his way back. He's getting there. He's scoring goals again, which is awesome. But to me, especially under the Conte years where he did like really minimize the midfield and just had like 2, Oliver Skip and whoever in the midfield. Like it's just exciting to see something happening in the middle again. And Kulusevski can just kind of be everywhere. So I'm going to take him, even though the numbers aren't there really yet. He scored, I think, maybe 1 or 2, but I'm excited about the action he's bringing.
Yeah, I love that. While I love Solanke being the first name thrown out, Kulusevski is my number 1 personally for most impactful player so far this season. I think he's been a revelation for the way that we play football. I will do you a favor and I'll get Brendan Johnson checked off the list. And I'm sure Max will not be surprised to hear that Brendan Johnson's the first name I'm throwing out. I am a self-proclaimed Brendan Johnson super fan. But 6-6, right? Not much else to say. He's been on fire. And as Max said earlier, he stepped up with the goals in a time where we really needed it. So I'll say Brendan Johnson, number 3.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and get Mickey. Bad game, but maybe his first one ever. So still consistent demon at the back.
All right, Robbie, bring us home.
I'm going pure vibes here. This is definitely a counter pick. I love to be the counter voice here, but I'm picking Pedro Porro on vibes. He's also had just some ridiculous passes from the back line, just some awesome passes up to the front. And again, he's playing 99% of the minutes. If you don't hear about him at all, that's also a compliment. Like he's not really the reason a lot of things. Yeah, of course, his defending will always need a little bit of work, but like, I don't know. He's just a pure vibes guy. The happiness he exudes. He's always smiling. I don't know if you guys saw that video of when they were walking on the pitch before the Europa match, and he was like singing the Europa theme song, or like humming it. I don't know. He's just finally starting to do interviews this year in English because he's just like learned enough English to start doing interviews in English. So I don't know. He's a pure vibes guy for me, but I love him for that.
He's awesome. Can I just say I said this on Thursday. He's everything you want, like mentality wise, as a Spurs player. Like he loves Spurs. He plays so fucking hard every game. He's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure you guys remember during the Conte years where everyone was like, "Why did we buy him?" Or just there was so much negativity.
It was like one game into the season. I was like, okay.
Yeah. He came out and said in a very early interview at Spurs, "I'm the type of person where if you put me in jail, I'll run the prison, by the time I'm done." And probably a better comparison, Pedro Porro. There's definitely a better way to express yourself in that moment than talking about getting put in prison and running the prison, right? But still, the point is that he is somebody who's going to come in and take charge and have a super diligent, strong mentality, and that's everything we need at Spurs, like you said. And I also think if you look at guys we haven't talked about or positions we haven't talked about, it's left wing. I don't think anybody's putting Son, Werner, or Mikey Moore in the top 5 quite yet. And Mikey Moore is maybe not the right name to throw in there because he's been on the right side and all of that. But then I look at the 6. We've had that conversation. We've talked about James Madison, and we've talked about Romero switching off a little bit, right? So I think Pedro Porro is a fine pick for that 5th position and probably where I would have went too. So, all right. So we're saying Dom Solanke, saying Kulusevski, we're saying James Madison, we're saying Mickey Van de Ven.
Not Madison.
Brendan Johnson. I said
Yes.
James Madison. I'm going to start over here, all right? We're saying number 1, Dom Solanke. Number 2, Dejan Kulusevski. Number 3, Brendan Johnson. Number 4, Mickey Van de Ven. And number 5, Pedro Porro. Anybody got any qualms or disagreements that they want to get off their chest?
I just want to say honorable mention James Madison.
Yeah. I'd agree with that. 100%.
I give an Iron Man award to Udogie for being the first, second, and third string left back for our team.
Yeah, for real.
No doubt. All right, cool. Well, that's going to do it for us at Emerald and Lilywhite.
Real quick, Academy Watch brought to you by the Wits End. Luca Williams, our net hat trick. Loan Watch, Brian Hill got called up to the Spanish squad.
Yeah.
Recall him from loan. We need him back. Brought to you by Rainier Growlers / Cascades. It's been way too long for this pod, so I just get that in real quick. Scott, back to you.
I love it, man. Thank you for making that speedy. We do always want to take time to talk about the academy and the Loan Watch. Those are important things that do factor into Tottenham Hotspur. And most importantly, we always want to take a second. So thank you to highlight our partner bars, obviously the Wits End and Finney Ridge, and Cascades and Puyallup / Rainier Growlers. And Puyallup Rainier Growlers is the current home until at least early 2025 when Cascades is able to pick up some more matches. So as we said last week, keep your eye on the socials. Those will tell you where you need to be if you're on the south side of the Sound for every match day. Make sure you get over there. We appreciate the bar so much for opening up and welcoming us in. Nothing is better than having an avenue to watch Spurs with a bunch of Spurs fans. It's a fantastic way to continue to grow your passion. So if you're somebody who's listening and has not been to one of these homes, if you're able, of course, please find some time to get down there and check it out. Please tip your bartender as well. Also, that is super important. They work really hard for us. It's really rare that you get, as a Premier League club, a bar that's just yours, right? A lot of clubs are sharing their bar space with other clubs, and that can be great, but it can also be not as fun at times, right? So for us to have homes that are wholly ours is something that we value and will never take for granted. So make sure you get down to one of those spots if you're able. For myself, for everyone at Emerald and Lilywhite, we appreciate it. You can follow the YouTube show at and Lilywhite on Twitter and at _Lilywhite on Instagram. Again, we are the official YouTube channel of Seattle Spurs. Seattle Spurs makes this all possible. Make sure you follow Seattle Spurs at Seattle Spurs on all socials, Seattle Spurs on Facebook. And as Max said last week, most importantly, make sure you subscribe to the email newsletter. We are seattlespurs@gmail.com. Let us know if you have questions. Please send us emails. But signing up to that email subscription will get you all kinds of information that you need. Match viewings, closures, openings, holiday parties, which we're a big fan of around here. So make sure, again, you sign up for that newsletter. For myself, again, at Scotchy Bird, for Max at Going Limbs, for Robbie at Robbie Light, and at Robbie _Light on Instagram and TikTok. I think I got it correctly there. Make sure you give us all a follow. We certainly appreciate it. And most importantly, make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We try really hard not to beg for those things here at And Lilywhite, but it's super helpful towards growing Seattle Spurs, which is our mission. So the more likes, the more subscribes, the more the algorithm pushes And Lilywhite, and most importantly, Seattle Spurs to the city of Seattle. It's all in efforts to grow the Spurs fan base and presence here in the great Emerald City. So again, we appreciate everybody's time, and most importantly, come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.